Hello, everybody. Oh,
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Last Minute Movies. We finally decided on a name.
fuck yeah.
Finally. So today we're going to be looking at the most celebrated film of 2019. It swept up all the Oscars, like how I sweep up dirt from my room. It is Parasite. You guessed it.
You actually clean your room?
Ah, yeah, I know. I did today.
Good stuff. Yeah, I mean, Parasite is an incredible film. And did you see it just now or like yesterday?
I saw it like 3 days ago. It's still etched in my mind. See, the interesting thing is like everybody's been talking about this film. I just watched it. Like even at my school, we had like extra credit activities surrounding Parasite. So my English teacher's like, if you watch this film, I'll give you extra credit. If you write about it, I'll give you even more extra credit. Still, I was meaning to get around it. I just never did. My mother, she's a part of SAG, so we got like the disc pretty early. So I popped it in my PlayStation because I don't have a DVD player, and I watched it. And it was really wonderful. It was a great, great film.
Nice. Yeah, I've seen the film a couple of months ago. I've seen it twice. Once shortly before it came out, and then another time a couple months later. And like honestly, like it is a very big moment. I loved it. Other than the fact that it's an incredible film, I really enjoyed it because it's a first foreign language film to win Best Picture. And as an immigrant filmmaker, I just really appreciate it because there are movies worthy of this type of notion that are not made in America. And
Absolutely.
yeah, this kind of makes Parasite a historical event almost. It made history and kind of opened the gates for what hopefully will be more movies to come because Korea and China and a lot of European countries develop their own film industries that are growing incredibly fast and they make really good content and it's just as good as Hollywood if you ask me.
The Korean film industry and the Japanese film industry in particular are very, very underrated film industries. Everyone talks about Hollywood, and obviously, I can go on and praise Hollywood all day, but I really do appreciate like foreign films, and especially like because I think my favorite director, Akira Kurosawa, he wasn't from the States, he wasn't around that Hollywood setting and all of that, and he just did his own films in a completely different part of the world, and they were just as good as any Hitchcock film that I've ever seen that was around that time,
Kurosawa
if
is
not maybe
incredible.
better. Oh
Kurosawa
yeah.
is incredible, and I think there's just a whole bunch of other directors from all over the world that have just impacted the development of cinema in general. And
Hmm.
from the top of my head, I'm just going through my cinema studies class. Fellini, at the beginning of the day, was all the Russians, Vertov and Eisenstein, followed by pretty much everybody else. I keep blanking out on the name who made the Seventh Seal, the director of Seventh Seal, but pretty much the directors from all over the world have shaped cinema into what it is right now, especially Hollywood,
Hmm.
because it has kind of
Yeah.
gathered all of these clusters of cultures that got together and eventually, formed the industry that we know right now. And we can't forget the fact that, there's still really good movies made overseas. But let's not rub on that too much. So, what did you think about the film? Let's dive into it.
So it's interesting. The film itself, I don't know exactly what I was expecting. I don't know. So for the first time I heard like, oh, this movie called Parasite, I thought it had something to do with some kind of like virus or something like that, which is kind of funny considering the circumstances now. But and then I thought it was a horror film. People were like, no, it's a thriller or something like that. I'm like, okay, so maybe it's about some sort of like parasitic creature. And then I heard that it was about wealth distribution, class systems, all that kind of stuff. And I was like, okay. And then but they kept saying that it was a thriller. So I didn't really understand the thriller part of it. And even when I was watching the film, like the first half of the film, I was like, okay, so how is this a thriller? I can understand it being almost like it's funny. There were some elements of a heist movie,
I
like
can see
when
that.
yeah, during the specific parts where they were kind of infiltrating all of the jobs of that rich family. But it felt like a heist film. I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of interesting, but I don't understand the thriller part. But it wasn't until like halfway through the film, once we get to a certain particular part, we're not going to talk about there because no spoilers right now, where I was like, oh, okay, I understand how this is a thriller kind of film. And from there there was so many different kinds of like tones and like different kind of styles of filmmaking that I was watching. It felt like a smorgasbord of just different kinds of like if a bunch of directors directed one movie, it kind of felt like that.
I can see
It
that.
was really interesting.
It has a lot of elements. It has a lot of things to say, a lot of commentary, and a lot of just kind of things to articulate about society in general. And I get the heist movie, but I think like at the core of the piece is definitely the class divide of the society that we currently live in, and just the difference in perception and in the ways which both of those people in the different classes of society try to survive, and the way they view
Yeah.
these things. And I want to say that to me, the thriller aspect of it was in the survival nature of the characters that are in the film. So this idea of surviving in the environment where you have to fight for the tiniest amount of space for all the things that you don't have, while also knowing that there's people out there who have everything, who own the world, that live in these giant, magnificent castles, while a lot of population are kind of forced in these tiny apartments. And just the way it's filmed, it embraces that divide. And there's even a scene, and it's not really going to be a major spoiler because it's a cinematography thing, where we just move from the top where like this rich person lives, and then the camera just keeps moving down. There's a lot of stairs, there's a lot of these paths and alleyways that all move at this downward slope that eventually bring us to the place where like the other people live. And that's where all of these like parasitic tendencies come from, the environment itself. And I really liked just the subtlety of the film, while it manages to be subtle while also is being really blunt with the statements it makes about society and a class divide. And just the fact that there are things that the rich are just so extremely oblivious towards about everybody else in the world, but also there's a lot of misconceptions that the poor, I guess, the way this film depicts it, the misconceptions that the poor would have about the rich, and the limitations that the person who doesn't have anything, who's forced to survive, the mental and the mental limitations that that person would have in the goals and the things they want. And there's been a really long-running metaphor. It's a really big thing in Russian culture and Asian cultures in general. I know Korea, this is something that derived from Korean culture into Russian, is that the idea that somebody who never had enough will only think about getting more, and their greed will never stop. And that's kind of a poison of humanity, is greed that comes from not having enough, from being born into the environment where you're forced to fight for it. In a balanced society, this type of parasitic tendencies will not develop. And that's the main commentary of the film.
Yeah, so the interesting thing about that is that when we're looking at the two different families, we're looking at the wealthier family and we're looking at like the poorer family and all of that. And, like the way the family like kind of seeps in and is almost like a parasite to the rich family, infiltrating everything and all of that. It's like on a surface level, like when I first watched it, I was like, oh, that's kind of fucked up. And I didn't really have like a lot of empathy for it or anything like that. But, keeping this film does a lot of interesting things, because when we talk about like wealth distribution and class systems, most people obviously go to the side of, the poor person. They're like, well, they're poor, they're less fortunate and all that kind of stuff. But I feel like this film did a very interesting take where you got to see both sides and both of their points. So you understood why the poor family was doing what they were doing, right? Because at the end of the day, we're all still human beings. And, despite wealth, race, color, sexual orientation, whatever it is, we're all human beings. We should all take care of each other. The idea of class systems are kind of dumb anyway. They're, pretty dumb anyways. And you understand, right? But then you can also see the rich family, and even though the father specifically was, he was kind of a rude asshole, they're still human beings and they're still just trying to live their lives. So it's just a very interesting sort of thing. And then when you take both families into account and we talk about the parasite, like the title of the film, it's like, okay, obviously the parasite is in the family, the poor family, seeping in and infiltrating the richer family. But then you can also see that the rich the rich family, like they're a parasite as well. Like, because everyone's like, oh, the poor, like it's kind of a thing to say like the poor leech off of the rich and all that kind of stuff. And when you think about it, it's really like the rich also leeching off of the poor as well. They were just as dependent on the poor as the poor was dependent on the rich. Like I remember this one specific part where there are actually two specific parts. We're kind of dipping into spoiler territories, but I think it's okay to mention. So there's this one part where the rich husband, I forget his name, but he's talking to he's talking about his wife, right? And he's talking about his wife, and she's saying like, yeah, she can't cook, she can't clean, she can't do any of that. And then the wife calls the mom from the poor family, is like, can you make this noodle dish for us and all that, because she can't cook or anything like that, and I assume he can't cook either. And it's just interesting. It's like, wow, it's like these people don't, because they're so rich and they're so in their own bubble, it's like they don't even know how to live their own lives. They don't even know how to act. I wouldn't say human, but they don't, it's like they just don't know how to care for themselves or anything like that. It's a really interesting kind of thing.
They're just not quite grounded. They're used to a certain lifestyle.
Yeah, it's a very interesting kind of dynamic. It's like, what if all of their money and what if all of their servants were like stripped? Like, how would they be able to fend for themselves?
Yeah.
It raises those kinds of questions. And that's why like this film is so brilliant in the way that it describes class and all of that, because it's not shitting on one side. It's not saying all poor people are, rats and they're this and they're that and they're and all of that. And they're not saying all rich people are, completely have a complete lack of empathy, they're assholes and yada yada yada. They delve into that kind of territory, like they do, but it offers a commentary on both sides and why both sides are dependent on each other.
Absolutely. And I have a transcript of Bong Joon-ho's Oscars, the speech he gave, which he gave on his own language, which is also its own historical thing. But before we jump into the spoiler section, I just really want to bring this up because it just talks a lot about the intention of the director and where he was creatively coming from. And this is just something I admire about him, because not enough people just, there's this universal question to all filmmakers is where the hell you get your ideas and how do you make quality content? And, people say, pretty much all the accomplished directors at some point or another say again and again that if it's not a personal story, don't do it, because you just can't execute something you don't really have a frame of reference for. That's what co-directing is for, co-writing perhaps, or just, work on a different project. And because Bong Joon-ho gave his speech in Korean, I don't think enough people have actually bothered, looking for the transcript. They're just like, oh my God, he gave it on a native language. This is awesome. And some people were actually kind of not okay with it, which I don't know why, because, he's Korean. Like, come on, dude.
Yeah, it's his own language. Let him speak his fucking, he's at the Oscars. He's in our land. He has to speak Korean. That's fucking ridiculous, but that's beside the point.
Yeah, but I'm just going to read his speech because it was fairly short, and I just think it's so incredible what he said.
Go.
Thank you. After winning the international feature, I thought I was done for the day and was ready to relax. Thank you so much. When I was young and studying cinema, there was a saying that I carved deep into my heart, which is that the most personal is the most creative. That quote is from our great Martin Scorsese. When I was in school, I studied Martin Scorsese's films. Just to be nominated was a huge honor. I never thought I would win. When people in the US were not familiar with my films, Quentin Tarantino, well, he said Quentin, but meant Quentin Tarantino, always put my films on his list. He's here. Thank you so much, Quentin. I love you. And Todd, referring to Todd Phillips, and Sam Mendes, great directors that I admire. If the Academy allows, I would like to get a Texas chainsaw, split the award into 5, and share it with all you. Thank you. I drink until the next morning. Thank you. It's just the humble nature of the speech and just the things he says. He made a personal story about the environment that he's familiar with and the things he had to say about it. And that's something that every filmmaker has to aspire to do. We all have things to say, and turning away from the unique experience that you have as an artist, as a filmmaker, is almost a crime sometimes, because there's a message you have to bring to the world. and I just feel like that speech he gave is refreshing in many ways,
Yeah.
especially after
Well,
the year
it
before.
why I feel like it's probably so refreshing is because Hollywood is it's been for a while now. It's been so glamorized and it feels kind of fake. It's interesting when we talk about Hollywood and being famous, people think about like money, they think about expensive cars, nice clothes, winning awards and like the glamour of all of it and just basking in being famous. But if you really strip down what, what the industry and the Hollywood industry is or is supposed to be, it's storytelling. And that's all it really is. And, this guy, I'm so happy where, his speech wasn't like, I like to think this and that. He just kept it very humble and straightforward, where he's just like, yeah, I'm just, thank you to all the people that I looked up to. I wish I could share that with them because they're on this journey with me as well. And all of that. Like, it's a very refreshing sort of thing.
Yeah. So on this note, I think we could move to the spoiler section.
All right. So basically, it's about this poor family that lives in like the slums, I assume, of South Korea or something like that. And and they're living in like a basement area of like this building, and it's filthy, it's dirty, there's bugs everywhere. Their toilet is like super close to the ceiling. That was a weird ass bathroom.
That location was
Uh,
incredible.
yeah, it was. Yeah. Oh, actually, that just goes to show like how good the set was. But we'll get to that eventually. What happens is that the son. Let's see. His name is Kiwo. I think
Hmm.
I'm saying that right. I apologize if I butcher these names.
Me too. I said Bong Joon-ho properly, but I'm gonna butcher every single person's name who have made this film, and it's a terrible, terrible thing. But I couldn't do it. I read all the names, and I couldn't do it.
Yeah, I'm good at pronouncing foreign names, but I've never had. I don't know anyone who's Korean, so I've never really had to pronounce Korean names as often.
Fair.
But
I have Korean
yeah,
friends, so I sincerely apologize to them too. I'm
it's all
sorry,
good.
guys. If you play a drinking game every time I mispronounce a name, please do it.
Yeah, you butchered my name.
That too.
uh, but Kiwo, he's a very bright, smart kid, and he is approached by his friend to tutor this girl who comes from this rich family in English, and so he goes, he tutors her, they kind of fall in love and all of that. But as he's doing all of that, he's studying this family and he's looking at them, and he's like, oh, okay, well, I'm making good money off of the tutoring that I'm doing, and I could see my family doing the exact same thing. So one by one, his family starts to sabotage um, the I guess like the workers, like the drivers, the nanny, and the teachers of the rich family, so that their family can all have jobs together. But the catch 22 is that the rich family doesn't know that the poor family, they're all related. They just think they're random people who are just like, oh, I know this person, like I know a guy who knows a guy and all that kind of stuff. But they were able to worm their way into this family and into this house and take care of it and tutor their kids, take care of their kids, drive the rich husband everywhere.
Well,
And so
essentially, they fake their identities, is what you're
yeah,
saying.
they fake their identities, they fake documents, which is exactly why I was saying it felt like a heist film at first, because I'm really like, oh, this really does, like, especially the part where they're trying to get rid of the nanny and they exploit her peaches allergy
Oh
and all
yeah.
of that. I was like, man, that's just straight up like Mission Impossible kind of stuff.
I thought it was just a
Uh,
dick move, bro. It's
I mean,
just
it was a dick move for sure, but who's nice in heist films? Halfway through the film, the rich family goes off and they go camping, and the poor family, they're staying in the house, they're eating all their food, they're talking about, oh, Kiwoo, if you marry Daihi, the rich daughter, I really probably butchered that name. If you marry her, you'll be able to, become rich, and then we can have this a place to ourselves. And then the former nanny, Moon yeah, Moon Guang, she like ends up knocking on the door, and she's all like, "Hey, I forgot something back in the place." And then they're all like, "What are you talking about?" So I'm kind of rambling, but to make a long story short, there's a bunker that's in the house where Moon Gwang has her husband, and her husband is hiding from loan sharks. And then, the mother, she says that Chong Suk, she says that she's gonna call the police and tell the family about the bunker and all that kind of stuff. But then Moon Gwang finds out that the mom, the poor mom, Chong Suk is actually has their family and they're all together in their
He
house. So
found
she
out that it's a
threatens.
heist, and they
Yeah, they find
threatened to
out
call
that
the
it's a
cops on
heist, and
them.
they threaten to tell the family actually.
Yeah, well, that
And so
too.
once, yeah, it will call the cops, tell the family. So then once that happens, the poor family they go and they lock Moon Gwang and her husband into the bunker. But then the rich family comes back, so then they're trying to hide all of themselves from the rich family, and that's where the thriller aspect comes in. You have like the darker color corrections. You have like the close-up films. You have like the very quiet moments. Very, I want to say
Subtle.
very, it's very subtle. Yes, very, very subtle. And especially the part where like they're hiding under the table and all of that. I'm like, man, this reminds me of something from like Friday the 13th or something like that, or Halloween.
To
Like it
me,
felt.
that was one of the most suspenseful scenes that
Hmm.
had literally nothing happen, because
Yeah.
it was just combining the thriller part of it, of them laying under that table, and you're just like, how are they gonna get out of this? And then the whole
Yeah.
smell thing arrives. It's like,
Yes.
honestly, the smell was one of my favorite elements of the story. The fact that like the father, who was poor, who's been trying to infiltrate this family, the key take, I think his name. I am
You take. Yeah.
for the 100th time. I'm so sorry for not saying this correctly, but the theme of like them smelling like poor people. They're not quite sure, like, the rich father. He's not quite sure what he's smelling, but something is up, and he feels like they smell weird, but he doesn't understand why or what it even means and why he keeps
Yeah.
smelling this. But it really, like, kind of this smell is attributed to the parasitic tendencies and to the greed
Yeah.
of this person who just really tries to latch on to whatever ways they can manage to survive.
And there's so many different like that the smell part comes up so much during the film. It comes when they're hiding. It comes up during the end, which we'll get to in a second, which is fucking insane. I did not expect that. But
Didn't
and
expect
all of
that.
that. And then the part with the phone where Daihee was like texting Kiwo and all of that, and he had to like turn off his phone. I was like, oh, so suspenseful. So basically what happens is that actually by hiding Moon Gwang and her husband, they end up like fighting each other, and the mother, she ends up Chun-suk, she ends up like kicking Moon Gwang down the stairs, giving her head damage. So basically what happens is that later on they're able to escape out of the house, and all of that, and then the mother Yeong Kyo, she ends up she ends up like having a birthday party for her son, and she talks about a time when her son saw Moon Gwang's husband emerge from the bunker, and their son like had a seizure. And so she said, ever since then, they've had their birthday. They've had his birthday away. Dasong's, that's the son, birthday away from the house and all that. And this is the first time it's going to be at the house. So she wants it special. She wants Ki Jung, who is the sister of Ki Woo. She was teaching Dawson art and all of that, so she wants her there, wants all the family there and all of that. But then Kiwoo decides to bring down some food down to Moon Gwang and her husband, and try to say, hey, let's try to work something out so that nobody has to know about this. And then Moon Gwang, he goes down there and to find Moon Gwang dead, and the husband escapes out of the ropes that he was detained on, and then he like hits Kiwoo over the head, starts bashing his head in, and then he grabs a kitchen knife, he goes outside, uh, and then he starts fucking everybody up, like stabbing someone like it's some goddamn fucking psycho shit. And then stabbing the sister, stabbing the mom. Everyone's getting fucking stabbed and killed and shit like that. And then they finally are able to kill the husband. The husband ends up dying, and it just everything's all bloody. Dong Sun's having a seizure again because he saw the guy, And then this is the most shocking part of the film. So like the rich father, don't know his character name, but the rich
I think
father.
it's Mr. Park. Like that's the way they refer to him
Yeah,
sometimes.
that's right, Mr. Park. Mr. Park. Yeah, Mr. Park ends up like he's telling Kim Ki-taek, the poor father, like, give me the keys or drive us to the hospital and all of that, or at least give me the keys so that we could take our son to the hospital. And then he's looking down at his daughter bleeding out. He's looking at his bloodied wife. And then he sees Daihee carrying Ki-woo's body, and his head's all bleeding and shit like that. And then, like, as Mr. Park goes to grab the keys, out of fucking nowhere, Kim Ki-tae grabs the knife, fucking stabs him in the chest, and then runs. And I was like, holy shit, I did not expect that at all, dude. It was really, really shocking.
It is crazy, and it's about where he ran too. Because he
Mm-hmm.
doesn't run away. He actually runs inside the house. He is gonna live in a bunker that every American afterwards referred to as the basement of the basement. I don't know why, they just did. So, um, yeah, and I have a thought about the ending. So, can I narrate the ending?
Yeah, go for it.
So, with the whole theme of the society, separated into the haves and have-nots, we're still following the son. Kind of, we start on the son's arc and we end on him too, with his father now being kind of stuck in that bunker underneath the basement.
Mm-hmm.
He now goes and tries to start a new life, and there is even this incredible sequence, and it looks real. And I'm not sure if it remains a question, kind of an open-ended ending, whether or not he achieves that. But the son basically has this dream of becoming rich and acquiring wealth through hard work and labor to be able to eventually buy this house that
Mm-hmm.
the rich family used to live in, and then finally free his father.
Yeah.
And my favorite part of it is that the father finds this light switch that is connected to one of the like exterior lights of the house, and
Mm-hmm.
he flickers it and leaves a Morse code message to his son, who
Yeah.
approaches to the house from like this kind of like a backward, not like the entrance, but like an angle where you can see that light flickering, and he just writes down the message that his father leaves him, just like telling him the news and everything, and just like the things that he does, and that he is alive. And that ending just blew my mind even more than the thriller part when people get murdered. I was just like, this just pushes and kind of gut punches the wealth and separation of things, because to me the ending really meant that yes, we just saw the clash of classes and all of this commentary and social commentary, but I think the main like thing about the ending that I really enjoyed is that although the story is technically over, that everything is culminated, the catharsis has happened, but the son is still trapped in the wealth, in the society, in the wealth divide that has been before and will forever be, seemingly. And his father
Yeah.
is still trapped in that basement because the society hasn't changed after that event. Nothing has fundamentally changed. And just
It's just a
like,
different rich family in that house, people sneaking around, all getting food,
absolutely,
just it's the same problems as before.
everybody is still parasitically trying to get shit from each other and survive in the
Hmm.
world.
So
Um,
yeah, so if there's one message I got from this film, it's that, and which I already knew, but money sucks. Because look at it, every single thing that has happened is because of a lack of money. If you look at the poor family, they're poor, they don't have money. The rich family, they do have money and all that kind of stuff, but they don't treat people correctly, which is why, well, at least the father didn't, which is why he ended up getting stabbed by Kim Ki-taek, right? The poor father.
yep.
And then Moon Guang and her husband were in that bunker, where the husband was in the bunker because he couldn't pay off these loan sharks because of a lack of money. So all of these problems that, like the deaths, the lying, the stealing, the making people lose their jobs, all of that stuff that everybody did is because of money,
It's
you
a
know?
paradox.
Yeah, and then more than anything, I have to say that there's so many ways that you can use the word parasite for this film. You could say that it's the families. You can say, the wealth and all that, so and all of that. But the idea of money itself is a paradise. Parasite, not paradise. Jesus.
Yeah, money
Yeah,
sucks. Money sucks. It turns
money
people into
sucks. Yeah.
parasites. It creates
Yeah.
parasitic tendencies in people of just trying to acquire stuff. Now, to some stuff. I have some notes about the film, about just like the impact that it made that has not been talked about too much. And I just kind of want to, yeah, I have like the storytelling elements saved for later. There is, we all know Bong Joon-ho. He made Snowpiercer. He made
I love that
Okja.
movie.
He made, and his less popular movies are Mother, The Host, and Memories of Murder. And they're all incredible films, and any movie buff has to see it. If you want a really good introduction to like Korean cinema, that is, I do want to say like more or less a little more adaptable to the Western gaze and the Western culture. Those are incredible films to watch to ease yourself in, and then move on to the world that is Korean cinema. It's incredible. And the co-writer that worked on the film, the Han Jim Won, I am terribly sorry again. He was I believe he worked on Okja before. He co-wrote it, and for the Parasite, he was initially hired as a research assistant because they talk a lot about wealth inequality and just things that do have to be very accurate to portray the environment that they're in. And then he just got upgraded to the co-writer because he was just engaged with the process so much, and his friendship with Bong Joon-ho certainly helped. And then imagine just this journey from a research assistant to co-writer and then a nominee for the Oscar. It's
I know. Yeah.
incredible the stories that happen there. And I guess yeah. So and the main actor, well, okay. Speaking of which, there's several main characters in the story. It kind of separates at some point because the son, the Ki-woo, is technically, we kind of start and end on him, so he seems like the main character. But Ki-taek, the father, is the man behind kind of like the plan. And even though he says there's a lack of plan, he's a combination of this mentor combined with just another character altogether.
The characters diverge a lot. So like at one point you think like, oh, okay, the son's the main character, but then they take time off of the son and they talk about the sister, they talk about the mom, and they spend, everyone gets a fair amount of screen time. Everyone gets a really good amount of screen time. And I really and I think that's really a good important thing, because it's also, at the end of the day, like, not only is this film talking about like wealth, it's talking about class systems and all that kind of stuff. It is a family film,
among other
like,
things.
I do consider it a family film, like, and also how class affects family. And you could see that their poor family was like, they were very close, and they did their things to survive, and just how close and together they were, because they were in such a detrimental situation that they needed each other. But when you look at the richer family, there was such a disconnect with them a lot of the times, like especially between like the Mr. Park and his wife and all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
the certain preservation of family values that occurs, and a disconnect that occurs when there's just so much wealth and stuff around you.
Involved,
and even the way it is filmed, when we are in the cramped apartments, we see 2 or 3 people in the shot very frequently. Whenever they talk, it's an intense close-up just because there's not enough space. It's tight, but also the tight shots communicate the connection between people and the fact that they're very close. Meanwhile, when we're at the big house and the rich kind of palace, the rooms are vast. They're predominantly empty, very minimalist setting, and people are really far away when they talk to each other. Now,
it's to jump off of that real quickly though. It's interesting, like, if talking about the set specifically, I want to divulge more into that. Like, and you're looking at the poor family, and you see, even though they're in such a tight, small space, how full that their house is. Well, I wouldn't call it a house, but their basement. I don't know.
Yeah,
how full that area is, right? There's books everywhere. There's even when there was a flood, the flood was filling up everything. There's the food, there's clothes, and there's just a bunch of shit everywhere, right? Yeah. But then and then when you look at like the rich family, and you see their house and you see how empty it is. But then here's this: when we see the poor family, right? We see because we see a change in the poor family. So in the first part of the film, like even though they're struggling to keep to make ends meet and all of that, we can see how full they are together, just like the place they are, how full they are in their relationships, how they communicate with each other, and all of that kind of stuff. But as we start to spend more and more screen time on the rich house and how empty that rich house is, it's almost like the emptiness of each specific character is brought into the light. And like, the father, and he ends up stabbing the other father, Mr. Park. We could see how empty and kind of shallow they become,
Absolutely.
as they're starting to gain more status.
And towards the climax, there's this moment of exchange between the daughter of Mr. Park, like the rich daughter, and the son from the poor family who was tutoring her. They talk to each other, and he just doesn't say much because he tries to appear as this like kind of mysterious, edgy, I guess. I think edgy is the proper word here, figure to her, because he doesn't really know what to say or like what to do. He doesn't really understand the rules that those people use to communicate, because that's how vastly different their worlds are. But to the girl, he comes off as edgy and interesting and mysterious, because I think in what kind of communicates about the characters is that they're all trying to give meaning to things, and they make sense of things in their own way. They're trying to fill up the void that is in them, because they're devoid of human connection and interaction in many ways. They don't necessarily get that from their families. However, I do have to say that it also kind of gave a nod that the stereotype, that so many people have about, rich people, is that they're not dysfunctional families, and they're not completely disconnected. And to me, honestly, it culminated in this very, very strange scene when they were hiding under the table, because just like that foreplay that was happening next to that table between the husband and wife, like the things they were saying to each other, and the thing, like kind of like there was a certain genuine element to it that was just purely human. And I don't mean to break down their dialogue or anything, but that kind of flashes out the relationship of that couple and the things they feel towards each other. And I don't think any of it felt unnatural or fake. And I think, mixed with the suspense and the fact that there is like a whole family of people that have been infiltrating their house for quite a while now, literally laying right next to them. And Mr. Park said that he could smell them. Just watching that suspense also kind of puts things in perspective with the way their relationship is built. That, in fact, the love and the affection those two people have towards each other, and, the sexual desires are very much similar to, way any other human would do. So apart from creating a giant separation between the haves and have-nots of the society, the film also manages to articulate the fact that there are things that makes all humans human. And the idea of communicating with each other, talking to each other. If you don't know how much this person is making, that person still looks like a human to you. And within the context of society, where we could assume that they're just a part of your world, that they live by the rules that you live by, it's so easy to assume things. Just the same way, Mr. Park assumes everything about pretty much everyone who works for him. And that's why it makes it possible for them to infiltrate in the first place. Followed by, the way the daughter treats the silence of the guy she fell in love with. It's just, it makes too much sense. And that's what to me, that was the scariest part of the film. All of that stuff made too much sense. It was too, I guess, like, accurate is not the right word, but you know what I'm trying to say. It
felt too real.
It felt too real in many ways. Yes, you can see that superficial lifestyle that just becomes a part of their day-to-day existence and affects all of their interactions, the way they perceive people around them. And it's crazy. Yeah, that was kind of my take on the third very important kind of line that the film had between the haves and have-nots. Now, there was one thing that I found out about the film that was very interesting, other than the cinematography, directing, writing. The actor who played the poor father, Mr. Kim, his name is Song Kang-ho. He was also in Snowpiercer, and he was also in Host. So Bong Joon-ho and him, they go way back, and I just really love his casting choice. I think his acting was incredible, and honestly, everyone's acting was incredible. And this is why 5 of the cast members actually won SAG Award.
Yeah, that the acting was very, very
Yeah,
good.
this is something that also wasn't talked about too much. I think it's incredible that, again, foreign actors get this type of acknowledgement. That means that they make world class media, and it's
Yeah, well,
incredible.
for foreign films, like, because like, it's just it's how underrated foreign films are and how important they are to filmmaking and storytelling in general. But like, one for foreign films, the thing is that there's no difference. The only difference between a foreign film and Hollywood film, honestly, is just different language. But if you really, and sometimes different cultures and all that, like a lot of foreign films, it's a commentary about their specific cultures. But when I'm watching Parasite, I'm just watching a film about class, and that's something everyone in the world can relate to, and they can talk about, and they can understand, and it's just a really important thing. It's like not there's not like different places of the world can contribute to storytelling as well, not just America. Let's look at, like, for example, this is gonna sound super fucking goofy, but if you think about like Godzilla, right? In the first Godzilla film that has ever come out, it literally invented a new style of filmmaking. Like, it invented a brand new style. We'll talk about Godzilla one day, the original film, but it literally invented a new style of filmmaking. So there's just foreign films have so much to contribute anywhere in the world.
A really, really important thing about acting. You're right. There is a giant cultural perception that I think in many ways makes work of an actor extremely different based on the country they're from. Like,
Hmm.
and in Korea especially, a very held back nature of certain things and ways people do things. Um, makes job of an actor very different because again, in a day-to-day life, like, American actors can allow themselves to just kind of be a little more free when it comes to that and unhinged when it comes to the day-to-day life. But in Korea, just with the culture and the way people handle themselves on public,
Hmm.
can drastically conflict with things you have to do on stage. And this kind of another reason why I think Korean actors just need this kind of recognition, because one thing is when American culture is kind of all over the place and in your face, and then your acting can also be that way because actors are supposed to emote. We're supposed to communicate emotions this way, and
Hmm.
in places like Korea, it's just not the case. There's a giant contrast in your life, and just the fact that everybody won the SAG award was just so happy. Like, it made me so happy because it acknowledges this other type of hard work that they have to do of just
and
separating
it
that.
you recognize them as good freaking actors, which is exactly what they are. It's like, yeah, they're speaking a different language, but the acting is still just impeccable of anything I've ever seen. You know,
Absolutely.
and just like Japanese films, if that I've watched, or European films, or African films, anything like that.
Absolutely. And there's one very noteworthy story that I don't think I've seen, but I discovered this when I was doing the research into the film, and it's of the actress Cho Yo Jong. I am terribly sorry about mispronouncing her name. Cho
Choyo
Yo
Young,
Jong. Yeah, she played
something
the.
like that.
She was the rich wife. She was
Yeah, the
Mrs. Park.
Yon Kyo. Yeah,
I believe so.
yeah,
And
that's the thing.
it's incredible just what her career was from the get go, and the ways in which she was portraying herself. Because I think her approach to her work and her acting and the kind of statement she was making with her career was very interesting. Because the vast majority of her roles were extremely. There was a lot of nudity in the role she was taking. There was a lot of very intimate scenes that so many people and so many actresses just would not necessarily agree to. She's always
Hmm.
playing this highly sexualized characters that is extremely unnatural for a lot of um, Korean actresses of that level.
Yeah.
And she just really wants to push the envelope on this idea of, um, being a little more unhinged and being able to show certain things and portray certain things in the media about femininity and sexuality that are just really not mainstream in Korea. And
Hmm.
for American audiences, this kind of might not sound like a big deal, but I think what she's doing is incredible. You should all check her out. She's an incredible actress, and the work she
Yeah,
did
she's
is
really good.
awesome. And I
Hmm.
think out of all the cast members, we have an incredible cast in this movie altogether. An incredible director that really took them to a very special place to make this film.
She was a
But
standout for sure.
she definitely stands out for me a lot with just the statements she's making and the ideas she's pushing and the ideology she's proposing. So that's kind of my take on the cast and the impact of the movie.
Yeah.
And I had some storytelling stuff that I noticed about it too that was just incredible. And I mean, all right. Yeah, I just thought that there's this idea of building an unlikable character. We see that motivation of every person in the film is money and survival and the parasitic sustenance, but they're not likable characters either, because we kind of have the separation of the two protagonists between the father and the son. And neither one of them is likable, because the father, we just kind of hate him the whole time because of the things he does and the moral compass that has absolutely been skewed. And then at first we kind of like the son because of the ideas that he has and, the job that he genuinely gets as the tutor. But then it's the fact that he listens to his father, I think, that made me just feel really weird. And I'm just like, I'm not sure about the moral compass of this dude. I understand the idea of listening to your father and following his footsteps and aspiring to be like him, but not like that, not with that type of moral compass that is just skewed as hell, that, is encouraging this type of parasitic tendency. I just don't think that is a trait of a likable character. Now, yeah, so we don't really like anybody, and all the rich people too, they're not portrayed in a way that is likable. They're portrayed in a way that is rich. They don't hide that like bougie, things they say and the things they do, because it might be a part of their reality, but for the general audience, it's just not a likable thing. We don't necessarily care that much. And there's a split between those two characters. And what I think the movie does really well is that, we might not like any of those characters, and we don't necessarily have a likable story arc to follow. But what the film does incredibly well with narration, and by narration I mean the structure of the plot, is that instead of having one unlikable character, we just split it into several main characters that all get the same amount of intimacy and screen time, that make us kind of like invest into all of them a little bit at a time. And because there's so many of them, it overwhelms us when we watch the film, and that engages us into watching not just the film and the characters, but also pay attention to the world.
Well, I feel like every character had their moments of likability and were likable. Like I could understand for the poor family, I can understand, because I actually, when I first watched it, I was kind of like, I didn't really like many people in the film. I was like, I mean, obviously the movie was fantastic, but I was like, man, those characters. But then I rewatched a little bit of it, and I thought about it some more, and I was like, wait a minute. And I was thinking, like, everybody has their likable moments, and specifically, like, the father, who's supposed to be the quote-unquote asshole, right? Mr. Park, but then when there's specific moments in the films you see him and he's on the walkie-talkie and he's talking to his son like it's some kind of military thing, and you're like, oh, look at him, he's like bonding with his son. And then there's where they're playing like the Indians and all that kind of stuff, and they're gonna play a game, and he hired the poor father to play the game and all that kind of stuff, and he's like, oh, well, he really is trying to make this as good for his son as possible,
Yeah, of course.
And there's just, everybody has a likable moment, which I think was really good, and which is why the ending was like, oh shit,
Absolutely. And I think although the characters themselves are not likable, the bond between them absolutely is. So like I said, and that's something I think about now, because I mean, I've seen the movie only like a couple of months ago, so I have a pretty good memory of things that happen. But like I think that the characters themselves might not be so likable, but the bond between them is very much the build of affection and care for each other, which I don't know if that necessarily makes a likable moment for the character. It doesn't make me root for him more in like his mischievous endeavors, but it makes I can still relate to the bond between father and the son, and like I can definitely say that I aspire. I don't aspire. I can definitely say that I related to the desire of a son aspiring to be like the father, and kind of having a certain amount of admiration for him as a parent, and that I think was great. And, also the parent being able to teach, being able to guide his son through certain questionable moments, and I gotta say, like, one of my favorite cinematography elements of the film was this kind of limbo moment in the middle of the film where I think it was towards the end when the flood happens, when the rains come and the family is forced to flee from all the way up. Like literally, as soon as they escape that tense situation under the table, the moment they escape is that they're forced to flee, and then they have to go all the way from that house, all the way at the top of the social hierarchy of the world we're in, and they literally have to walk physical stairs, hundreds of stairs seemingly, back down to their own little habitats, and they're being flooded, and there's like you just see hundreds of people on the streets trying to save the little belongings they have. And what I did notice is kind of like the similar effect I had when I was watching 1917, when you watch all these soldiers in the trenches and you just get what's happening just from their facial expressions. You see those people trying to save their stuff, and they're just gripping on it for dear life. And there's even like moments of dilemma where like, do I save my sibling or do I save this from flooding?
Yeah, it's very it just goes to show how much the idea of like again money and materialistic things holds on to us.
Yes,
you know, even the computers and the cameras that we're using to record and film ourselves and all of that. You know, it's a very strong bond we have with our materialistic things, and that's the way you know a lot of government systems have set people up for. So.
Absolutely. And just, you know, this idea of all these people just wanting to grip onto stuff. And that was my favorite movie and my favorite scene in the film. Because
that was my favorite movie in the movie.
Honestly, it is its own movie. Like, it shows its own world. And in that one scene, it fleshes it out so much. The similar like type of this 1917, you know, vibe when you see the expression on people's faces, followed by the way those people try to save their stuff. And you're just like, this is a world where people, all they care about is just this materialistic well-being and the idea of grabbing whatever you got, whatever you can get your hands on. And if you get an opportunity, you go for it. And that's kind of, I mean to sound terrible, but like capitalism.
Oh, you're right.
You're right. In its true form.
Definitely is.
You know,
you're not wrong.
This social commentary in Parasite is absolutely, it's the strongest suit it has. And the way it kind of shatters the storytelling into these different elements that all come together makes it a true work of art, in my opinion. And that's why I think, as good as like there's definitely three really major points for me in the film, which is, you know, the scene under the table for several reasons, the final beats, and you know, gotta mention also the scene in the basement. That's when the thriller happens. It made me think, like, it's so scary. It actually made me think of have you seen The Road?
No, I don't think I've seen it.
It's an incredible horror film. It's a thriller, but it's a fucking horror. There is an element to it that messes you up so much, and like I remember I was watching it at like 2:00 in the morning. I just couldn't fall asleep again until morning. Because I'm just gonna spoil it for you.
No, don't. I want to watch it.
Okay, yes. For those of you who have seen it, the basement scene in The Road made me just like I thought of that when watching the cinematography when they're chasing each other around that basement trying to choke each other. Like honestly, The Road is just an incredible film. It had a micro budget. Well, it didn't have a micro budget. It had like pretty much a mini budget, but just the way it is built through color and everything else. The same way this movie did, actually. The basement is executed very similarly, and the thrilling part of it is definitely kind of like, it's so vast and it's so big and it's so impactful. I think the movie should definitely be called a thriller just because of that. But like I said, my favorite scene in the film is definitely the flood because of the amount of things it has to say and how clearly it delivers the overall message of the film. Is that I felt like, you know, I wanted to see what happens next with the characters and I was invested into it. But the moment I saw that scene happen and the moment we just kind of moved on with the, you know, what happened next in the movie, I was just like, I get the message and it's loud and clear. I did not understand the word these people have been saying, but the expressions in their faces and the way they were doing what they were doing, which is salvaging their stuff in an event of a flood, not caring for each other sometimes and caring for the things they have. that's the message of the movie, and
See,
it's
it's interesting
awesome.
when you say that because, like, I remember when I was in NYU, I did their film program there when I was a wee lad at 18 years old. It wasn't that long ago. But and my teacher was telling us that, and we weren't getting into sound or anything. We were just doing silent films. But he said that a good film should still be a good film even if it's silent. And I felt like even if I turned off the subtitles, or hell, if I just turned off the sound and the subtitles, and I just there was nothing, I could still understand the story and what was happening and the specific beats of it, the important parts like the smell. And you see, and you look at the face, you know, like you look at people's face and you see they're disgusting, and you see the father like smelling his shirt and all that kind of stuff. And you see like the tutoring scenes, and the love that the main character has for the girl that he's tutoring, and then like how they're and then like the horror and the sadness that the wife, I forgot, the former nanny had for her husband, and vice versa, and all of the different things and stuff that was going on throughout the film. Like you could still understand it even if there wasn't any sound, because good storytelling is just that. It's good storytelling. It's like if I was a good storyteller, I told you, like, I don't know, Three Little Pigs or something like that, and or like so for example, if you had a book like Three Little Pigs, let's say if you didn't look at any of the words or anything like that, you could still understand what was happening, right?
Yeah,
You
the
could understand
images,
Big
the
Bad
wolves and
Wolf,
the pigs.
the imagery, exactly. You could still understand it. And so yeah,
Yeah, and
it was a master class of filmmaking.
and Parasite absolutely proves, I think, Parasite and many other international and foreign films prove the fact that film language is universal and universally understood. And I think the main historical impact of Parasite is that it is so universal, the language of film, that it can be on top of everything else,
Yep,
regardless of where it came from and what culture it came from, because human experience is human experience, and that's kind of what movies are ultimately are. Just like any
exactly.
other art form, it is an attempt to depict a human experience.
And it doesn't matter the class, it doesn't matter the race, sexual orientation, anything like that. Filmmakers, you're still a storyteller, and you can still get your vision across and tell really engaging things that connects people, because that's what we do. And that's what I got from this film.
And we got to do it well. Good
And
stuff.
definitely had to do it well, yeah.
Definitely got to do it well.